Cancel anytime. That's what the page said when you signed up for Photoshop. Cancel anytime. No commitment. Just a monthly subscription. You clicked it. In June of 2024, the United States Department of Justice walked into federal court and said that sentence was a lie. They sued Adobe. They named two specific executives by name. And in March of 2026, Adobe agreed to pay $150 million to settle the case. This is the story of the most expensive cancel button in software history and what an Adobe executive said internally about the fee that was trapping you. Stay with me because the comparison they used is something you will not forget. Let's walk through it. You go to Adobe's website. You want Photoshop. You see three plans. There's a monthly plan. There's a yearly plan prepaid. And there's a third plan which Adobe preselects for you as the default. The third plan is called Annual, Paid Monthly. Look at that name, Paid Monthly. It sounds like the monthly plan. The price is lower than the actual monthly plan. There's no big upfront charge, so you click the one Adobe already chose for you and you go on with your night. You did not sign up for a monthly subscription. You signed a one-year contract. If you try to cancel after the first 14 days, Adobe charges you an early termination fee equal to 50% of every month remaining on that contract. Cancel in month 2. You owe roughly 6 months of subscription fees in a single charge on your card. Cancel in month 4. You owe 4 months. People reported being hit with bills of $200, $300, even $400 just to leave. Now here is the part that turned a confusing pricing page into a federal lawsuit. How was that early termination fee disclosed? The answer is, it wasn't, not really. And the way it wasn't is the entire case. According to the federal complaint, the fee was buried. It was placed in tiny gray text. It was hidden behind small icons you had to hover over with a cursor. It was tucked onto pages most users never opened during sign-up. The complaint says Adobe knew customers were confused because customers had been complaining about it for years to the company and to the Better Business Bureau, and Adobe kept the design anyway. On June 17, 2024, the Department of Justice, acting on a referral from the Federal Trade Commission, filed suit, not just against Adobe the company, against two specific Adobe executives, David Wadhwani, the president of Adobe's digital media business, and Maninder Sawhney, a senior vice president. The government wanted civil penalties, monetary judgments, and permanent injunctions against all three defendants. That part is unusual. Federal regulators do not normally name individual executives. They named these two because, according to the complaint, they directed and controlled the system that was generating the revenue. And then a piece of evidence surfaced that made the whole case explode. In July of 2024, the FTC released an unredacted version of its complaint. Inside that filing was a quote from internal Adobe communications. An Adobe executive describing the early termination fee used 3 specific words, a bit like heroin for Adobe. That is the quote, attributed in a federal filing to internal Adobe communications. The same documents, again according to the FTC, said that disclosing the fee more clearly would cause, quote, a big business hit. Adobe disputes the FTC's framing. The company's general counsel told reporters the person who made that comment was not part of the executive team and did not speak for the company. The federal court took the FTC's version seriously enough that Adobe ended up settling for $150 million. So that is the full picture. A pre-selected plan with a confusing name. A fee buried in tooltip text, 2 named executives, an internal communication in a federal filing comparing the company's pricing strategy to a drug, and a lawsuit Adobe chose to settle rather than fight to verdict. The math of that settlement is what's going to bother you. In March of 2026, Adobe agreed to a $150 million settlement with the Department of Justice, $75 million in civil penalties, plus $75 million in refunds and free services to customers who got hit with these fees. Now let me put that number in context. In its 2024 fiscal year, Adobe reported total revenue of approximately $21.5 billion. The majority came from its digital media segment. The majority of that came from Creative Cloud subscriptions. And the most pushed Creative Cloud option, the one millions of subscribers were defaulted into, was the annual paid monthly plan. The exact plan the federal government sued over. Do the division. 150 million is roughly 0.7% of 1 year of Adobe's revenue. Real money, not crippling. The kind of penalty a company like Adobe writes off as a cost of doing business and keeps moving. And here is the part most reporting buried. Half of that settlement, the 75 million in free services, gets paid back to customers in the form of more Adobe products. So part of how Adobe is paying its penalty is by giving people more of the thing that got them sued in the first place. The injunctive relief, the part that actually changes behavior, requires clearer disclosure of the early termination fee and easier cancellation pathways going forward. That part is real. That part protects the next person. But for the years Adobe ran this design, while regulators investigated and customers complained, the financial consequence was a fraction of what the practice generated. Adobe is fine. Wadhwani and Sawhney are still at the company. This is what people mean when they say corporate fines are a cost of doing business. The math worked. They paid the ticket. They kept the road. So now the question that actually matters to you: what do you do with this? 3 things. First, log into your Adobe account today and check what plan you are on. Adobe does not advertise this clearly, but your plan type is shown under Manage Plan. If it says Annual Paid Monthly, you are in a 1-year contract. Find your renewal date, put it in your calendar. Second, Adobe gives you 14 days from the start of your billing cycle to cancel without the early termination fee. After that window, you owe 50% of remaining months. The 14 days is not optional. It is the only door out without paying. Third, if you do not need Photoshop or Illustrator every single month of the year, you have alternatives that do not lock you in. Affinity sells Photo, Designer, and Publisher as one-time purchases, no subscription. DaVinci Resolve is free and used in Hollywood. GIMP and Krita are free. Figma covers most UI work. Adobe is not the only option. It is the default option. Those are different things. The one thing to remember: Adobe's Cancel Anytime was always Cancel Anytime, just not anytime free. Read the plan name before you click.